Sometimes life changes in a single moment. For Aria Voss, that moment came with a letter sealed in black ink. A letter that carried the weight of her family's past and a promise she never made. The sun had barely risen over the small town when Aria sat beside her mother's bed, holding the letter with shaking hands. The paper felt heavy and her heart beat fast. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes tired from too many sleepless nights. "Open it, Aria," her mother whispered weakly. Aria slowly unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved over the sharp, dark words written on the page. It said her late father owed money to the Moretti family, a name that made people in town go silent when spoken. The letter said the debt must now be paid, or something dear would be taken instead. Aria's throat tightened. She looked at her mother, who turned her face away. "It's true," her mother said softly. "Your father borrowed money to keep our shop open. He promised to pay it back. But after he died, I could not do it alone." Aria's hands trembled. She wanted to shout, to ask why her mother hadn't told her sooner. But seeing the sorrow in her mother's eyes, she stayed quiet. Aria knew what the name Moretti meant. The Moretti family ruled the city's dark side, the ones no one dared to cross. That evening, Aria went to work at the flower shop. The air smelled of roses and lilies, but she could not find peace. Her thoughts kept running back to that letter. What would they take from her family? Their house? Their shop? Or something worse? As the sky turned dark, the bell above the shop door rang. 2 tall men in black suits stepped inside. The smaller one spoke first. "Aria Voss?" Her voice came out small. "Yes. You need to come with us," the man said. "Our boss wishes to speak with you." Aria's heart stopped. She looked toward the back of the shop where her mother rested. "I can't leave my mother alone," she whispered. "The boss insists," the man said, his tone firm but not cruel. Aria looked down at her shaking hands. She knew this was not a request. She locked the shop door, picked up her coat and followed them outside. The black car waiting by the street looked too big for someone like her. She climbed in silently. The streets grew darker as they drove. Buildings disappeared, replaced by tall iron gates and flickering lights. When the car stopped, she saw a grand stone house surrounded by guards. Aria had never seen such a place. The walls were covered in vines and the windows glowed with golden light. It looked more like a palace than a home, but the air felt heavy as if it carried too many secrets. A tall man waited at the door. His black hair was neatly combed, his gray eyes sharp and unreadable. He wore a dark suit, simple yet powerful. This was Luciano Moretti, the man people whispered about in fear. "Miss Voss," he said calmly. "Come inside." Aria swallowed hard and followed him into a wide hall. The sound of her shoes on the marble floor echoed through the room. She could feel eyes watching her, men standing by the walls, silent and still. Luciano stopped in front of a table. He did not sit. He simply looked at her with eyes that could see through her. "Your father owed my family a great deal," he said in a low voice. "We gave time. We gave mercy. But mercy cannot last forever." "I didn't know," Aria said quickly. "Please, I will find a way to pay. Just don't hurt my mother." He studied her face for a long moment. "You have courage," he said finally. "Few people speak to me like that." Aria lowered her gaze. "I'm not brave," she whispered. "I'm just scared." Something in her voice made Luciano pause. He walked closer, his steps steady. "Fear can be useful," he said. "It keeps people alive." Then he turned slightly toward the window. "Your family's debt is too large to repay with money. So you will work for me." "Work?" Aria repeated, unsure what he meant. "You will stay here," he said. "Help in the house. My mother loves flowers. You will take care of her garden. In time the debt will be cleared." Aria nodded slowly, trying to breathe. At least he was not cruel. She had expected worse. Stories of what Mafia men could do had filled her childhood. Yet here he was, calm and cold, speaking like a man who lived by rules. "Do you understand?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said softly. Luciano's eyes softened just a little. "Don't call me sir," he said. "Call me Mr. Moretti." He turned and signaled to one of his men. "Show her to her room." Aria followed the guard up the long staircase. Every step felt heavy. She thought of her mother, of the small house they shared, of the simple life she had lost in one night. When the door closed behind her, she sat on the bed, her heart still racing. The room was beautiful, A window that looked over a wide garden, soft lights, clean sheets. But she felt trapped. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the house below, she could hear Luciano's quiet voice giving orders. His tone was calm, but his words carried power. Aria looked out the window and whispered to herself, "I'll do what I must." But deep inside, a question grew: what kind of man was Luciano Moretti really? The world called him a monster, but something in his eyes told her there was more. And in that dark, quiet house, their story, full of danger, warmth, and unspoken feeling, had just begun. Sometimes, the most beautiful places can still feel like cages. Aria had never seen a home so grand, yet she had never felt so small. The morning sun spilled through the tall window, waking Aria from a restless sleep. For a moment she forgot where she was. The soft white curtains, the gold edges on the walls, and the faint smell of roses made it look like a dream. But when she heard footsteps in the hallway, her heart reminded her, this was not her home. A woman dressed in black knocked on her door. "Breakfast is ready, miss," she said quickly. "Mr. Moretti wishes to see you afterward." Aria stood up and dressed quietly. She wore the same simple dress from the night before. Her hands shook as she brushed her dark hair and tied it neatly. Then she followed the woman through long hallways filled with paintings and marble floors that shone like mirrors. The mansion was large and silent, yet every step she took made her feel watched. The guards stood by the doors, their eyes cold and still. It was like living inside a picture that could break at any moment. Downstairs, the smell of coffee and warm bread filled the air. Aria's stomach turned with nerves. At the large table sat Luciano Moretti, the man whose name made others whisper. He was reading a newspaper, his sleeves rolled up, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead. He looked up when she entered. "Sit," he said quietly. Aria sat at the far end of the table, unsure if she should speak. Luciano didn't eat much. He folded his paper and studied her. "Did you sleep?" She nodded. "Yes, Mr. Moretti." His gray eyes softened a little. "You may call me Luciano when we are alone. My mother prefers gentleness in her home." Aria's surprise showed in her face. She nodded again. "Thank you, Luciano." For a moment, something strange passed between them, a feeling too soft for the sharp air around them. But it vanished quickly when he stood and said, "Come. I'll show you where you'll work." Outside, the garden stretched wide behind the mansion. Flowers of every color covered the ground, but some were wilted, their petals fading. Aria knelt down and touched the soil. "They just need care," she whispered. Luciano watched her quietly. "My mother loved these," he said. "After she fell ill, they began to die. Then I'll bring them back to life," Aria said softly, her voice full of quiet promise. Luciano looked at her, and for a moment, the coldness in his eyes melted. "Do what you must," he said. "If you need anything, tell Santino." He pointed to a tall man standing nearby, Santino Rossi, Luciano's right-hand man. Santino nodded politely. His face was serious, but there was kindness hidden in his eyes. "If anyone troubles you, come to me," he said gently. "Thank you," Aria replied. The hours passed slowly. Aria worked hard, cleaning the garden and trimming the dry flowers. The sun warmed her skin, and the quiet wind made her heart calm. She could almost forget where she was, almost. From the upstairs window, Luciano watched her for a long time. The woman he had brought to repay a debt was not what he expected. She did not cry or beg. She worked, silent and brave, her hands gentle but steady. Something inside him shifted, a feeling he had long pushed away. At lunch, some of the guards joked about her. One said with a laugh, "The boss has a soft spot for the flower girl." The others chuckled. Luciano stepped into the room, his face hard. "If I hear that again," he said in a calm, cold voice, "you'll be working in the cold for a week." The laughter stopped at once. The men lowered their heads. Luciano turned away, but his thoughts stayed with Aria. Later, when Aria came in to bring flowers for the hallway, she met Luciano in the corridor. He paused, his eyes landing on the dirt on her hands. "You should wear gloves," he said. "I don't mind the dirt," she replied softly. "Flowers don't bloom without it." Luciano blinked, surprised by her words. "You're not afraid of much, are you?" "I'm afraid of many things," she said. "But being afraid doesn't help the flowers grow." He almost smiled just for a moment. "You speak like my mother," he said quietly. Then he walked away before she could answer. That night, Aria sat by her window, looking at the moonlight over the garden. Somewhere below, she heard the soft sound of a piano, a melody both sad and gentle. It made her heart ache in a way she couldn't name. She didn't know it was Luciano playing. He, too, sat alone, thinking about the quiet girl who had brought life back to his dying garden. Both hearts were lonely. Both carried pain they didn't speak of. And slowly, without either of them knowing, something was beginning to grow, not from power or fear but from something much deeper. Sometimes danger does not come with loud noise or guns. It comes quietly, hiding behind smiles and soft words. Days turned into weeks in the Moretti mansion, and Aria began to understand the strange rhythm of life there. Each morning she worked in the garden. Each evening she brought fresh flowers to Luciano's mother's room. The old woman, though weak, always smiled when she saw her. "You have a kind heart, my dear," she would whisper. "Kindness is rare in this house." Aria would smile shyly, though her eyes often drifted toward the tall windows, wondering what went on beyond them. She could hear men talking in low voices late at night, footsteps moving through the halls, doors closing quietly. There was a darkness in this house that even the sunlight could not touch. One afternoon, as Aria was trimming roses, she heard someone approach. When she turned, she saw Santino, Luciano's loyal man, standing near the gate. His face was calm but his eyes held worry. "Miss Aria," he said softly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "You must be careful." Aria frowned. "Careful? Why?" "This house is not safe for someone like you," Santino said. "Not everyone wants you here. Some think the boss is growing weak because of your presence." Her heart sank. "Wait. But I only take care of flowers." Santino sighed. "To men like these, anything that softens the heart looks like weakness." Aria lowered her head. "I don't mean to cause trouble." "I know," he said gently. "But still, keep your distance. Especially from Mr. Moretti. The closer you get to him, the more danger you invite." Aria nodded, though she didn't truly understand. She had seen kindness in Luciano, a quiet kindness that hid behind his cold voice. He wasn't cruel to her. In fact, she often caught him watching her from afar, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. That evening, while carrying a basket of flowers through the hall, she turned a corner and almost collided with a man she hadn't seen before. He was tall, with lighter hair and a sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, he said smoothly. "You must be the famous flower girl I've heard about." Aria stepped back. I'm sorry. I didn't see you." The man chuckled softly. "No harm done." He leaned closer. "I'm Marco Moretti, Luciano's younger brother." Aria's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I didn't know there was another." "Most don't," Marco said, his voice warm but teasing. "Luciano likes to act as if he's the only one that matters." Aria wasn't sure how to respond. She gave a polite smile and tried to move past him, but Marco blocked her way. "You must be brave staying here," he said. "My brother isn't an easy man to please." "I'm not here to please anyone," she said softly. "I'm just here to work." Her honesty made Marco grin. "Careful, or he might start to like you more than he should." Aria frowned. "That's not my wish." He stepped aside then, still smiling as she walked away. But she could feel his gaze follow her down the hall, and it made her heart uneasy. Later that night, Aria brought tea to Luciano's office. He was standing by the window, the city lights glowing faintly outside. "Set it there," he said, not looking at her. She placed the cup on his desk and hesitated. "I met your brother today," she said carefully. Luciano's eyes lifted sharply. "Marco." She nodded. "Yes." He seemed kind. Luciano turned toward her, his face unreadable. "Be careful around him," he said in a tone that made her chest tighten. "He's not like me." Aria wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes were distant. She nodded and turned to leave. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "You shouldn't trust everyone here," he said quietly. "Some smiles hide sharp teeth." She looked back at him. "And what about you, Luciano? Should I trust you?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then he whispered, "Not yet." That night, Aria lay awake, listening to the wind outside her window. She thought of Santino's warning, of Marco's strange smile, and of Luciano's quiet voice telling her not to trust him. Her heart was confused, caught between fear and something deeper, something that warmed her whenever she saw him. She didn't know it yet, but she had already stepped into the heart of a storm, one made not only of danger and secrets but also of love she could not escape. Sometimes love begins in silence, not with words, but with a look that lingers too long, or a touch that comes when hearts forget to be afraid. The next morning, soft rain fell over the mansion. The garden glistened with tiny drops that sparkled like glass beads. Aria stood by the window, watching the rain fall on the roses she had cared for. She wanted to go out and cover them, but the thunder made her pause. As she stood there, she heard a knock on her door. It was Santino. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you," he said quietly. Aria nodded and followed him down the long hall. The air smelled of rain and coffee. When she entered Luciano's office, she found him sitting behind his desk, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. A large dog lay at his feet, a dark, loyal-looking creature with gentle eyes. Luciano looked up. "Come in." Aria stepped closer, her hands folded in front of her. "You called for me?" "Yes," he said, glancing down at the dog. "This is Nero. He's been with me since he was a pup. He's family." The dog raised his head and wagged his tail softly. Aria smiled. "He's beautiful." Luciano nodded. "He is. But last night, during the storm, he hurt his paw. He won't let anyone touch it." Aria knelt slowly near the dog. "May I?" she asked softly. Luciano gave a small nod, watching her closely. Aria stretched out her hand, speaking in a calm, kind voice. "It's all right, boy," she whispered. Nero sniffed her fingers, then rested his head against her knee. She smiled and gently lifted his paw. There was a small cut, not deep but bleeding slightly. Without thinking, she tore a piece from the edge of her apron and wrapped it around the paw. "There," she said softly. "All better." Luciano watched in silence. No one ever spoke so kindly in his house. The way she moved, gentle yet sure, stirred something deep inside him. When she looked up, she found his eyes on her. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. The rain, the guards, the mansion, everything. It was only the two of them and the quiet beating of two hearts learning to listen. "Thank you," Luciano said, his voice lower than usual. "He trusts you already. That's rare." Aria stood, brushing the dust from her dress. Maybe he just needed someone to be gentle. Luciano's lips curved into a faint smile, small but real. "Maybe," he said. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was soft like the sound of rain on glass. Later that day, Aria returned to the garden once the rain stopped. She bent over the wet roses, trimming away the broken petals. Her hands were muddy, her hair damp from the mist. Luciano came out quietly, holding an umbrella. "You'll catch a cold," he said. Aria looked up, startled. "I'm fine," she said. "The flowers needed me." He held the umbrella over her anyway. "Let me help," he said. Aria shook her head, smiling a little. "You don't seem like someone who likes dirt." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but I can learn." For a few minutes they worked together in silence. The feared Mafia air and the girl who spoke to flowers. The world felt simple again. When they finished, Aria looked around at the garden, now fresh and alive again. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Luciano looked at her instead. "It is," he said, though his eyes were on her, not the roses. That evening, when Aria went to her room, she felt a warmth inside her chest that she couldn't explain. She touched the window pane, still wet from the rain, and smiled softly to herself. Downstairs, Luciano sat in his study, staring at the small bandage she had made for Nero. It was torn and uneven, but he couldn't bring himself to remove it. He had lived his whole life with power, wealth, and fear around him. But that day, for the first time, he had felt something far greater: peace. And it came from a quiet girl who loved flowers and didn't fear his shadows. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew something had changed. Something soft had begun to grow in a place that had always been cold. Sometimes, love begins not with grand promises but with a single glance across a quiet table. A moment that says more than words ever could. It had been 3 weeks since Aria came to the Moretti mansion. Each day she worked in the garden, cared for Luciano's mother, and stayed out of trouble. Yet deep inside, her heart was no longer quiet. Every time Luciano entered the room, her chest tightened. Every time he spoke her name, she forgot to breathe. One morning, she was watering the lilies when Santino came to find her. Miss Aria, he said, Mr. Moretti wishes for you to join him for dinner tonight. Aria froze. Dinner? With him? Santino nodded. Yes. It's not a request. All day Aria tried to calm her nerves. Why would he want to eat with her? She wasn't from his world. Her hands were rough from work, her dresses simple, her voice soft. Still, when evening came, she put on the only nice dress she owned, pale blue with tiny white flowers along the sleeves. When she entered the dining hall, the sight took her breath away. The long table gleamed under a golden chandelier. Candles flickered in tall holders, casting warm light over everything. Luciano stood near the window, his black suit perfectly pressed. When he turned to see her, something unreadable flickered in his eyes. You look different, he said quietly. Aria smiled nervously. It's the same dress I've always worn. Then maybe I'm just seeing it properly for the first time, he replied. He pulled out a chair for her and she sat carefully, her heart racing. The food was simple, roast chicken, bread and soup, yet Aria could barely eat. She kept her hands folded in her lap, afraid she might spill something. Luciano noticed. You don't need to be nervous, he said gently. You're not in trouble. Aria looked up, meeting his eyes. Then why am I here? He leaned back, studying her face. Because I wanted to thank you. My mother says she hasn't seen her garden so alive in years. Aria's lips curved into a shy smile. It's the sunlight and the rain, not me. Maybe, he said softly, but I think it's something more. Their eyes met and held, not by accident, not by chance. The world around them fell quiet. For that brief moment, the Mafia house didn't feel cold. Felt like a home. Luciano poured her a glass of water, his hand brushing hers lightly. The small touch sent a warmth through her that she didn't understand. She looked down quickly, afraid he might see her heart in her eyes. He changed the subject. Tell me about your life before this, he said. Aria hesitated. There's not much to tell. My father ran a small shop. After he died, I took care of my mother. We had little, but we were happy. Luciano's expression softened. You miss him. Every day, she whispered. But I try to remember what he used to say, that good hearts can survive even in dark places. Luciano looked down, his jaw tightening. He was right, he said. For a few moments, neither spoke. The candlelight flickered between them, warm and soft. Aria wanted to ask him about his own life, if he was happy, if he ever felt alone, but she didn't dare. Then, without warning, the door swung open. Marco Moretti stepped inside, his tone playful but sharp. Well, what's this? My brother having dinner with a servant? Luciano's eyes turned cold. Not now, Marco. Marco smirked. I see. So the rumors are true. His gaze moved to Aria. Be careful, flower girl. My brother's kindness always comes with a price. Aria stood quickly, her face pale. I should go, she said softly. Luciano stood too. Stay, he said firmly, his voice quiet but strong. Marco's smirk faded, replaced by something darker. Luciano stepped toward him. Leave. The air in the room grew thick. For a moment, Aria thought the brothers might fight. But Marco only chuckled and walked away. Careful, brother, he said over his shoulder. Hearts are harder to protect than money. When the door closed, the silence felt heavy. Aria stared at the table, her hands trembling. I'm sorry, Luciano said quietly. He shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Aria shook her head. It's all right. I should have known my place. He frowned. Don't say that. You've done nothing wrong. For a long time they stood there, neither moving. Then Aria looked up and whispered, he was right about one thing. Luciano's brow furrowed. What? Sometimes hearts are harder to protect. He didn't answer. He only looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she saw not the Mafia boss but the man beneath the power. That night, as Aria lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the dinner, about his quiet voice, his guarded eyes, and the way her name sounded when he said it. And in his study, Luciano sat alone, staring at the empty chair across from him. He told himself it was foolish to care, that she was just a girl paying off a debt. But deep down he knew, something had already begun that neither of them could stop. When danger comes quietly, it doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits in the shadows, testing how far the heart will go to protect what it's beginning to love. Days passed after the dinner, but the memory of it stayed in both their hearts. Aria still felt the warmth of Luciano's gaze whenever she closed her eyes. She told herself it meant nothing, that men like him lived in a different world. Yet every time he walked by, her heart stirred in a way she couldn't control. Luciano too had changed. He tried to bury himself in business meetings and long hours at his desk, but Aria's gentle voice lingered in his thoughts. Her honesty, her quiet courage, they disarmed him in ways no enemy ever could. But peace never lasted long in the Moretti world. It was a gray afternoon when the first sign of danger appeared. Santino came into Luciano's office, his face tense. "Boss, there's been talk in the streets," he said quietly. "Someone's planning something against us. The De Rossi family." Luciano looked up sharply. "What kind of talk?" "They've been asking questions about the mansion. About the girl." Luciano's expression darkened. "What girl?" Santino hesitated. "Aria, sir." The sound of her name in that moment made something cold run through Luciano's chest. "Why her?" "They say she's a weakness," Santino replied. "That the Moretti boss has finally found something he'd bleed for." Luciano stood from his chair. His jaw tightened, his mind already racing. "Double the guards. No one gets near her." "Yes, sir," Santino said, leaving at once. That night, Aria was in the garden again, unaware of the whispers in the dark. The lilies she planted had begun to bloom, small and white, like stars scattered across the earth. She smiled softly, wiping her hands on her apron, when she sensed someone behind her. "Miss Aria," came a familiar voice. It was Luciano. She turned quickly, startled but glad. "Mr. Moretti. I didn't see you there." He looked around the garden, his face calm but his eyes alert. "You shouldn't be out here alone." "The air helps me think," she said quietly. "And the garden feels safe." Luciano's gaze softened. "Safety can be an illusion," he murmured. Aria frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then said, "There are people who might wish to harm those close to me. You must stay inside after sunset." Her brow furrowed. "But I'm no one important." He looked at her, then really looked, his voice lowering. "You're important to me." Aria froze. The words hung in the air, soft but heavy. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Luciano stepped back slightly, as if realizing what he'd said. "I just mean, you work for my family. Your safety matters." But both of them knew those weren't the words he meant. That night, as Aria lay awake, she heard strange noises outside. The distant rumble of engines, muffled voices, and a shout cut off too quickly. She sat up, heart pounding, then crept toward the window. Down in the courtyard, she saw men moving in the shadows. Some weren't wearing the Moretti colors. Before she could think, the door burst open. It was Santino. "Stay away from the window," he whispered. "What's happening?" Aria asked, frightened. "Trouble," he said shortly. "They've come for him." He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the hallway. Gunshots echoed outside, faint but close. The house trembled with the noise of chaos breaking loose. When they reached the lower corridor, Luciano appeared, tall, composed, but his eyes fierce. "Santino, get her to the cellar," he ordered. "No," Aria said, breathless. "You'll be hurt." Luciano looked at her, his voice low and steady. "I'll be fine. But you must stay alive." Before she could argue, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch brief and gentle. "Go," he whispered. Santino led her through the hidden door behind the kitchen. The cellar was dim, filled with old barrels and the faint smell of wine. Aria crouched in the corner, her heart thundering as the sounds above grew louder, shouting, footsteps, the slam of doors. And then silence. Minutes passed like hours. Then at last the door creaked open again. Aria stood, fear gripping her, until she saw Luciano step down the stairs, his shirt torn, a streak of blood along his arm. "Luciano," she gasped, running to him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said softly. "It's over." But when she reached to touch the wound, he caught her hand. His fingers were trembling. "They wanted to take you," he said. "They thought they could use you against me." Aria's eyes filled with tears. "What? I'm nobody." He shook his head slowly. "You're not nobody. Don't ever say that again." Her lips trembled. "Then what am I to you?" He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he whispered, "The one thing I can't afford to lose." Aria's heart broke open. She wanted to speak, but no words came. So she just stood there, her hand in his, the sound of his heartbeat loud in the silence. Outside, the night carried the scent of smoke and fear, but in that cellar, something stronger was born. A fragile, dangerous kind of love neither of them could deny anymore. Love can bloom even in dark places, but secrets have a way of stealing the light. Sometimes the truth doesn't break a heart in one blow. It breaks it quietly, piece by piece. The next morning the mansion felt different. The walls that once echoed with quiet peace now carried the memory of danger. Guards moved around the grounds, their eyes sharp, their voices low. Aria stayed in her room most of the day, trying to calm her thoughts. She couldn't forget the look in Luciano's eyes the night before, that mix of anger, fear, and something softer. Something that told her she mattered to him. But she also couldn't forget the blood on his arm, or the sound of gunfire outside. It reminded her of what he truly was, a man feared by many, a man who lived in a world of danger. That evening she found him in the library. The fire burned low, lighting his face in soft gold and shadow. He was sitting by the window, a glass of dark wine in his hand. She hesitated at the doorway. "May I come in?" Luciano looked up, his expression gentle. "Always." She walked closer, her hands folded together. "You should rest," she said softly. "You were hurt." He smiled faintly. "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have," she said, sitting across from him. "But last night, you scared me." His eyes softened. "I didn't want you to see that part of my world." "Then why keep me here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm just a housekeeper. If people want to hurt you, they'll come after me again." He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Because if you leave, I'll worry. And I can't protect what I can't see." Aria's heart skipped a beat. "You shouldn't care so much," she whispered. "Too late," he said quietly. The room fell silent. The fire popped softly. For a long moment their eyes held, two hearts caught between fear and something far deeper. Then Aria looked away, blinking back tears. "I don't understand you, Luciano. You say kind things, but your life is full of danger. How can someone gentle fit into a world like yours?" He looked down at the glass in his hand. "Maybe I want something different now," he said. "Maybe you make me see what I've lost." Her breath caught, but before she could reply the door opened. Santino entered, holding a small black envelope. His face looked troubled. "Boss," he said, "this came an hour ago. I didn't want to disturb you." Luciano took the envelope and opened it. A single photograph fell out, an old picture of a man and a woman holding a small child. Aria's eyes widened as she leaned closer. That's my parents," she whispered. Luciano froze. His hand tightened around the paper. "Where did this come from?" she asked, her voice shaking. Luciano didn't answer right away. His face had gone pale. "Luciano?" He slowly handed her the envelope. Inside was a note written in rough handwriting. It said only, "Does she know who really took her father?" Aria looked up at him, her face drained of color. "What does this mean?" Luciano's jaw tightened. He stood and turned away. "It means someone is trying to hurt you, and me." "Who took my father, Luciano?" she asked, standing. "Tell me the truth." He didn't speak. "Tell me." Finally he turned, his voice low but heavy with guilt. "Aria, your father wasn't taken by the Dirassi family. He was caught in one of our fights. My family's fight." She stared at him, her lips trembling. "You mean?" "It was years ago," he said quickly. "I didn't know until later. If I could change it, I would. I swear." Aria's eyes filled with tears. Your family killed my father?" The words struck the room like thunder. Luciano stepped closer, his hands open. "Aria, listen to me. I didn't know. I didn't want this life. I never wanted to hurt you." But she stepped back. "You said you'd protect me. You said you cared. All this time, you've been the reason I lost him." Luciano's voice broke. "Please let me explain." She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. "There's nothing left to explain." Without another word, she turned and ran out of the library, her sobs echoing down the long hall. Luciano didn't follow. He stood alone, staring at the photo on the floor, the same one that showed a smiling man he never meant to harm, and the little girl whose heart he had just broken. Outside, the wind howled through the garden, bending the roses she had planted. The night carried her name in its whispers, but she was gone, running from the one man she had started to love, and from the truth that had shattered everything. When love meets betrayal, it doesn't vanish, it hides behind tears, waiting for one last chance to be understood. The night was cold when Aria ran. The wind whipped against her face as she crossed the garden where the lilies swayed under the moonlight. The mansion that once felt like safety now looked like a cage made of stone and shadows. Her heart hurt with every step, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. All she could hear was Luciano's voice in her mind. His words about her father, the truth she wished she had never known. The man she had begun to trust, to love, was part of the very world that had destroyed her family. At the back gate, she pushed it open and stepped onto the dark road beyond. The night smelled of rain and smoke. She walked quickly, holding her shawl tight around her shoulders. Behind her, the mansion lights flickered. Somewhere inside, Luciano was searching for her, calling her name. But she didn't turn back. By morning, she reached a small village miles away. The people there didn't know her. She found work in a bakery, cleaning tables and sweeping floors. The woman who owned the shop gave her a small room upstairs. It wasn't much, but it was quiet, and Aria told herself she could start over. Yet each night, when the streets grew still, she would sit by the small window and whisper a prayer she didn't fully understand. "Lord," she said softly, "help me forget him." But the heart does not forget so easily. Meanwhile, back at the Moretti mansion, Luciano was losing sleep. For the first time in his life he felt helpless. Power, money, loyalty, none of it could bring her back. He sent men to search for her, but no one found a trace. Days turned to weeks. Each morning he looked out the window toward the road, hoping she'd appear. But the road stayed empty. Santino tried to comfort him. "Maybe it's for the best," he said one night. "She was too pure for this world." Luciano's voice was hoarse. "She was my peace, Santino. Now there's nothing left." He returned to his office and opened the drawer where he had kept the photo of her parents. He stared at it for a long time. "I owe her more than an apology," he whispered. "I owe her the truth." One evening, as Aria closed the bakery, she heard the sound of a carriage stop outside. She turned and froze. A tall man stepped down, dressed in black, rain glistening on his coat. Luciano. For a moment, the world fell silent. Only the rain spoke. He didn't move closer. He just looked at her with tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much pain. "Aria," he said softly. Her throat tightened. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to be," he said. "I needed you to hear the truth from me, not from others." She turned away. "I already know the truth." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You know part of it. Your father was caught in a fight my family started, but he died because he was trying to save one of our men. He saved a life that night. Mine." Aria's eyes widened. "Yours?" He nodded slowly. "I was young, foolish, and in the wrong place. Your father saw me. He pulled me out when the fire started. He saved me, and I didn't even know his name until years later." Her lips trembled. "Then why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid you'd hate me. And now I see that keeping silent only hurt you more." Tears welled in her eyes. "You should have told me, Luciano." "I know," he said. "And I would take it back if I could. I'd trade every bit of power I have to undo that night." Aria looked at him for a long time, her heart caught between anger and sorrow. The rain kept falling, soft and steady. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. "I don't ask for forgiveness," he said. "I just want you to know the truth. And if you choose to walk away, I'll let you go." The words broke something inside her. He wasn't commanding or proud anymore. He was just a man who had lost his way. She wiped her tears with her sleeve. "You should go, Luciano. Before someone sees you." He nodded slowly. "If that's what you want." He turned to leave, but she spoke again. "Luciano." He stopped. "Thank you for telling me." He gave a small, sad smile. "I'd rather you hate me for the truth than love me for a lie." Then he left, disappearing into the rain. Aria stood there long after he was gone, her heart heavy but clearer. The pain was still there, but beneath it, something gentle stirred, the kind of feeling that could one day forgive, even if it couldn't forget. That night, she dreamed of her father's voice saying softly, "Forgive, my little one. Don't let the darkness win." And when she woke for the first time in weeks, she whispered a prayer not to forget Luciano, but to understand him. Sometimes love doesn't fade with distance. It waits, quietly, faithfully, until the heart is brave enough to believe again. Months had passed since the night in the rain. Aria's life in the small village had grown calm, even gentle. She worked each day in the bakery helping the kind old woman who owned it. The mornings smelled of fresh bread and coffee, and the evenings were quiet enough for prayer. She told herself she was healing. She told herself she didn't think of him anymore. But every time thunder rolled across the sky or a black car passed down the street, her heart would still skip a beat. She still thought of Luciano. One afternoon as she closed the shop, a stranger came in, a young man with a bruised face and fear in his eyes. "Please," he whispered, "I need help. They're after me." Aria's hands trembled. "Who's after you?" Before he could answer, two men in dark coats burst through the door. They looked dangerous, the kind of men she had hoped never to see again. The young man pushed her aside. "Run." But Aria didn't move fast enough. One of the men grabbed her arm. "Where's Moretti?" he growled. Her heart froze. "I don't know," she cried. "Liar," the man hissed. "You're the girl, aren't you? The one he hides." Before he could say more, a loud crash came from the street. Tires screeched. A black car stopped right outside. The men turned, guns half drawn, but they froze when they saw who stepped out. Luciano. He looked colder than she remembered, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp. But when he saw Aria, his face changed. "Let her go," he said quietly. The men hesitated. Everyone in the room could feel the danger in his voice. The taller man sneered. "She's not your problem anymore, Moretti." Luciano took a slow step forward. "Everything that happens to her is my problem." The room went silent. Then, with a swift motion, Luciano disarmed one man and struck the other, knocking him to the ground. It all happened so fast that Aria could only gasp and cover her mouth. The men stumbled out, terrified, leaving behind the frightened boy and a trail of broken glass. Luciano turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" "I came to protect you," he said simply. "The Durasi family found out you were still alive. They wanted to use you again." Her voice broke. "You shouldn't have come. You'll only bring danger." He stepped closer, his voice low but full of warmth. "Danger was already coming, Aria. I just wanted to make sure it didn't reach you." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Aria whispered, "You shouldn't still care." Luciano smiled faintly. "That's not something I can stop." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the tiredness behind his strength, the loneliness that matched her own. The man who once scared her now stood before her like someone human, wounded, and sincere. The young boy who had come into the bakery spoke softly. "They'll come back," he said. "They won't stop." Luciano nodded. "Then we'll leave before nightfall." Aria's eyes widened. "We?" He nodded once. "I won't leave you again." That night they left the village together. The road stretched long and dark beneath the moonlight. Aria sat beside him in the car, silent for most of the drive. Finally she spoke. "You didn't have to come." Luciano glanced at her. "Maybe not. But my heart never left." She looked down, her hands folded in her lap. "You hurt me, Luciano." "I know," he said softly. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." The wind blew gently through the window. The world outside was quiet, but inside the car, something began to mend. Hours later they reached a small house by the sea, one of Luciano's safe places. The sound of the waves filled the night. When Aria stepped out, the air felt fresh and free. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Luciano nodded. "You're safe here." As she looked at the sea, her heart softened. For the first time she saw not the feared man everyone spoke of, but the man who had come back for her, again and again, no matter the cost. And deep inside she knew the truth. Love like that could never really die. Every love story has a moment when the heart must decide, stay safe in silence or step into the storm for love that feels like home. The morning sun rose gently over the sea, painting the waves in soft gold. Aria stood on the balcony of the small house, watching the light shimmer across the water. The sound of waves was peaceful, but inside her heart, a storm still moved. Behind her, Luciano was making coffee. The smell filled the quiet kitchen. He moved slower than usual, as if afraid to disturb the calm. When Aria turned, he looked up and gave a small smile. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." He poured her a cup and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment they both paused, the touch soft but full of things neither could say. They sat together by the window. For a while there were no words, only the sea and the wind. Then Luciano spoke, his voice steady but gentle. "I'll have to go back soon," he said. "The men who attacked you won't stop. If I leave things undone, they'll only find us again." Aria stared at her cup. "So you'll go back to the same world you hate?" He nodded slowly. "Just long enough to end it? To make sure no one can ever hurt you again?" She looked up at him. "And after that?" He smiled sadly. "After that? I don't know. I've never known peace before you." Her eyes softened. "You could choose peace now. You could stay." He looked at her for a long time, his expression tender but torn. "If I stay, they'll come for you. If I go, maybe you'll be free." Tears filled her eyes. "But I don't want freedom without you." Luciano reached out and gently touched her face. "You don't know how much those words mean to me." His hand trembled slightly against her cheek. "I spent my life taking Aria. Power, land, money, everything. You're the first thing I ever wanted to deserve." Aria placed her hand over his. "Then prove it. Come back alive. And the fight. And after that, come home." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will." 2 days later he left. The sea winds blew strong that morning, and Aria stood by the window watching him drive away. She whispered a prayer under her breath. "God, bring him back to me." Days passed slowly. She waited by the sea, watching the horizon each evening, hoping to see a car coming down the road. Some nights she dreamed of him, standing in the rain, reaching out his hand. And then one evening, just as the sun began to set, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and there he was. Luciano stood in the doorway, his face tired but whole. A small smile curved his lips. "I told you I'd come home." Aria ran to him and he caught her in his arms. For the first time there was no fear, no anger, only peace. He rested his forehead against hers. "It's over," he whispered. "We're free." She smiled through her tears. "Then let's live, Luciano. Let's build something that's ours." And as the waves crashed softly outside, they stood together, holding on to each other as if the world could finally rest. For once, love had found its way through danger, loss, and forgiveness, not because it was easy but because it was true. If you felt Aria and Luciano's love touch your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional love stories filled with passion, redemption, and second chances. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Luciano? Red heart.